Terrence Hill, the real estate consultant, Investor Insight Series. Today we're sitting here with Ryan Lubin of Lubin Property Management. Ryan, listen, it's always a pleasure to meet you. It's good to see you again. Ryan was one of the instrumental people early on in my career, even before real estate agent, even before real estate investing, really just new to real estate period, that, you know, embraced me, allowed me to kind of work alongside his company, kind of do some stuff with them. And now I have the pleasure, you know, almost a decade later, we're sitting down in one of your buildings.
And you still have your hair.
Yeah, I do. I'm trying, you know. I got to keep, so I think I'm going to go out west to California to get the guy to do thing on the inside. But with that being said, I want to talk about the current market conditions, about some history about you and the company, and really just try to give the people, the average real estate investor, some insight in terms of understanding how to go about vetting a real estate management company, what to look for when they're trying to buy investment properties, what things to kind of stay away from, what things to try to consider when you're dealing with contracts. Really just kind of a broad array of different aspects of the industry. So I want to start with the history. So your company, so it's a family-owned company?
So it's just me. I do have another partner also. Okay. I started probably about 15 years ago. We started, I moved to Memphis. I was originally from here. I came back, and I saw a need for property management. There wasn't a lot of companies 12, 13 years ago that were really doing property management. Very few, if any, doing it in the single family market. Lots of multifamily, but not as many in single family. Started with one house in Frazier, and then now I think we're up to about 1,500 plus doors that we're managing, single family and multifamily. And just saw a need to have technology. A lot of the management companies were mom and pops that, you know, just kind of use spreadsheets, and we were one of the first companies to really adopt this online software and provide that to people and let people all over the world, country, be able to see kind of what's going on with their properties.
Okay, and that makes sense too. So for you, so you said you seen the need, you wanted to fill the need. So did you have any prior experience in real estate or?
Yeah, great question. So actually, I had managed properties in Atlanta.
Okay. So you had some working knowledge.
And I'd worked with one of those mom and pop type of management companies.
So you knew, so you had a contrast.
I saw what they were doing and how they ran their business, and I said, okay, there's just got to be a more technological way to do it that will help people, make them feel more comfortable with their properties.
Yeah, that makes sense too. So from the time you started 15 years ago to today, what things have changed the most in terms of how things have changed in terms of property management from a company perspective, and things that owners, the difference in terms of owners back then, or, you know, clients back then and the clients now?
So I think that we found a lot more people getting into the single family market. And we're finding, and, you know, people always own kind of large apartment complexes. We're finding more people, you know, that are more interested in, you know, they have a regular day job, and this is just like an investment, like a stock form. So that's the biggest change. At first, it was more active people. This is what they were doing for a living, and now we're finding that people have other jobs and they're buying these properties as investments, and they're looking at it as just another asset class to invest in money.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. So in the last 15 years, so as things evolve, you think more people are getting into, you think it's more people that's looking into investing in real estate as an option? Because it seems to be more like a fad now, especially on social media. Like, everybody want to be in the real estate, like everybody want to be a business person, but you know, it's one thing to say you want to do it. It's something totally different to actually get engaged involved in doing it.
So I joke sometimes. I think the reason they might buy one house in Memphis is just so people can be out with friends or at the bar and tell somebody they own real estate. And I find that sometimes. I don't know why they bought that property, but that's why they bought that property, just so they could be out talking. So we have seen that it's also because of technology, it's become easier.
Yeah, that's true
too.
You know,
just like you can log on to your Charles Schwab account and see how your stocks are doing, you can log on to software now and see how your real estate investments are doing.
That makes sense too. I think technology has really leveled the playing field in terms of location and distance, and in a lot of cases prices too. I mean, because people choose Memphis for a reason. They choose Memphis primarily because of the cash flow and the lower barrier of entry in terms of purchase price, all in cost, so to speak.
And that's the same client, same reason people were investing 15 years here in Memphis and investing now is that the price point to get in, if you live out west or live in California, some people's driveways cost just as much a house here in Memphis. So they're like, they look at it and say, man, I can get in a house in Memphis. It used to be $15,000, but now let's say it's $50,000, and they go, wow, this is a deal.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, as an investor, as somebody that's looking to get into investing, right?
Yeah.
What are the top 3 things you think every investor should know, regardless of price points, regardless of location? Like, what things they need to look for in your experience, in terms of when they're looking to acquire property?
So I think one thing is you need to look at it like a stock. You're gonna have ups and downs. If you think every month is gonna be perfect or every year is gonna be perfect, that's where I think
your own business.
You really want to do a long-term hold. You want to get into it, and the number that we found is successful is 10 years. Because within that 10 years, you're gonna. Even look at we take the last 10 years, right? People who bought properties 10 years ago, right? Even if their property didn't do so well year to year on the rents or on repairs, now the value of the properties, a lot of them, they doubled, some of them even tripled.
Yeah, that's true.
So if they hung out 10 years and things weren't going so good, now they want to exit, they can exit at a really good point now and still make a profit over those 10 years.
Yeah, and that's a good key point too. And I talk to a lot of investors around the country and outside of the states, is that one thing I like to try to get them to understand, like, you want to try to have as many exit strategies as possible, but also too, buying and holding is a strategy as well, because buying and holding can shield you in some cases from, in the last decade has been a classic example, from selling too quick and taking a loss versus selling now and being able to take something off the top and being able to move on and do something different. So I think that's a really, really critical and key impact as well. So on the property management side, you've been doing this over 15 years. What are the top 5 repairs that you see most frequently when dealing with managing rental property?
Gotcha. So plumbing, the toilets are breaking, the sinks are breaking. Your HVAC is going to be a big cost to you. Big expenses are going to be your HVAC and your hot water tank, and then the roofs. Those are your main things. And some things you can do to limit that exposure is that when you're buying the property, you're doing your due diligence. Sometimes even when you buy the property, even if the things are okay at that point, if they're a little older, we're at the point now where we're telling people, just maybe go in and replace them now. Go ahead and change that flapper on the toilet, because the flapper on the toilet's what, $5, maybe $10 at Home Depot about a flapper. But a resident can call you one day about a flapper, you're gonna spend $125 replacing it because it's a service call, and then they can call you the next day about their leaking faucet. So if you go in there, you're a little bit more proactive when you buy those things. It saves you, if anything, it saves you service costs. Yeah,
that's true. And I try to let investors know, listen, once you acquire the property, if it's already tenanted or you plan on placing the tenant with a management company, what you want to try to get is a list from the tenant as soon as possible. So when the company comes out, they're able to deal with as much everything at one time, and this one service call versus, like you said, 5 service calls for $50 worth of repairs.
Correct, and that's it. Because every time they're going out, and any company's charging for them to go out there, which makes sense. They got to spend gas, they got to do all things. But yeah, the trick is to kind of knock it all out at first. And you just brought up a very insightful thing that most people don't know to do. They'll get that home inspection report, right, or that commercial report, and they'll look at it, but they never think to ask the resident. So what happens is you close, no one's even talked to the resident or asked the resident, what's going on? Because the resident might know that over in that left corner it leaks every week, right? But before you had that inspection, somebody went and killed that ceiling, and it looks fine to the inspector. He doesn't know any better, right? It's not his fault. And no one thought to ask the resident, does your roof ever leak? And every time a downpour comes, it leaks. Or a window leaks, and the home inspection not catches.
That's true too. Yeah. So speaking to the tenants is always ideal. So you're picking up some gems already. They can last you a lifetime too. So another question. So what are some of the top questions that when a person is vetting a property management company? What are some of the top 5 questions you think they should ask the property management company in terms of just determining whether they want to use them as an option to manage their property?
So, and this is going to sound a little crazy, right? But I think you were talking earlier before this about the value of things, right? So I would try not to focus on so much what the percentage is.
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the first questions that they always ask.
And I will tell you, because this isn't a trade secret, but if they're charging you less on their monthly percentage, right, they're just making it up somewhere else. So it's one thing to think about, what you want to find out, and what I find is the biggest heartburn for most of our investors, right? Number one, ask them about the transparency, okay? So like, just an example of us, if a work order comes in, right? The moment a resident calls in a work order, you get notified, right? And it's exactly what the tenant calls in. If the tenant calls in and says, we haven't fixed their thing for 6 months, you can see, and you can go on your portal and see if that happened. So I would start with number one, how do I know that my resident's gonna be taken care of? Because ultimately, if your resident's taken care of, things should go a little smoother, right? So that's the first thing I would ask. The other thing I would ask, you can definitely ask about the fees and do those things. Another thing to ask is, how do they handle their maintenance? So a lot of management companies now have become maintenance companies. And in addition to the maintenance where they're already making money, they charge an additional percentage. It's a new thing that you're starting to see. We don't do that, but ask them that. So in addition to your maintenance, right? Do you have not a markup? Do you have a supervision fee?
Yeah, I've seen supervision fees. I've seen administrative fees. I've seen, of course, you're always going to get the service call fee. I mean, that's just to some degree. Yeah.
Right. And the problem is, in all honesty, if you live outside the city, right, and your toilet breaks, and if your toilet costs $200 a break versus $500 a break, right, there's nothing you can do about it. You're not going to fly from California or Egypt or anywhere in the world to come to. I mean, you're just going to have to accept it. So I tell people really to focus a little bit on the maintenance. Another thing that kind of we do that most people don't do is our material, we don't mark up any material. So if you need a new air conditioner for your place and we buy it wholesale, we pass that on to our owners. Now there's a one thing when you're doing something like that, you have to feel comfortable that, okay, sometimes things go over, right? And you're working with a company that is looking out for your best interest, and you're not, if you're working with a company that's always going in and they have that supervision fee, I don't know, it gets a little hairy.
Yeah, that's true, because it's difficult to disseminate, okay, what is, if you're managing the property and you're charging a fee to manage the property and you doing stuff within the context of management, that's still a part of the process, and you're charging an additional fee for that. Like, I don't know, like, when does this end? Like, how many fees are we going to get?
So that's you need to really understand the fees. You need to ask, and you need to ask about specifically how does the maintenance work. Everyone's making money on maintenance. Okay, everyone has their most property management companies now have maintenance companies, right? And they're making money on maintenance. The question is, in addition, are you then charging another supervision fee? So that's where I would start, because the maintenance is what's going to cost you the most money. The 8, 10%, 5%, whatever you're paying, the leasing fee, whatever you're paying.
It's nominal compared to.
It's so nominal. It doesn't sound like it when you're doing your spreadsheet, because you're doing your spreadsheet, that's all your. But you're not thinking about the cost of your maintenance. So I would ask about that.
I know you've had this too. I had several. I work a lot with retail and do investment stuff too. So sometimes you run across a homeowner, right? They lived in a home a long time. They're ready to sell it potentially, but they're also potentially exploring renting. They're emotionally attached to the property. They may be a little bit OCD. How do you have a conversation with? What kind of conversation do you have with these homeowners?
Great conversation. Usually I tell them not to rent their house. I'll tell you. Usually I tell them, look, this is no longer your home, now it's an investment. So can you detach yourself from that? So I tell them, like, if they like that fridge that's in the house, right, and they think that's the greatest fridge in the world, they need to go ahead and remove it. If they care about those blinds, they think those blinds or those drapes they put in were the most beautiful drapes and blinds, they're better off removing them. Because now it's going from it's going from your personal home where you put your mark on it. Another thing that always comes up, and this might be easier to think about, like the color of the walls. Some people think that their red walls are the most beautiful walls in the whole entire world, and they spend a lot. I'm like, no more. We're going strictly to just gray. And so I tell them first, they want to get into it. What's the reason that they want to keep it as a rental versus selling it? Some say, well, right now it's not the time. I might come back to Memphis one day. So if you're going to do that, just be prepared if you come back that house is not going to be the one you get. A garden. If you have a beautiful garden out your side your house, or you have beautiful plants and stuff, you might as well go ahead and take them out, because those residents do not care about or want to maintain that. So it's very interesting. The other thing to be prepared for is that the stuff that didn't bother you, that maybe didn't work in the house, a resident's going to call it in. every time they leave their
Yeah,
house.
that's true, yeah.
The resident calls them about this leaky faucet that the owner never even noticed, maybe ignored it. They're always going to call them things. So
That's true. Yeah, I think that's really, really important too. And I try to let these homeowners know, like, listen, it's different. It's one thing to kind of look at the money, but the emotional part of it is the grief, the stress it can cause you. No amount of money can make up for that gap, right? It's just one of those situations where it's best just to liquidate it, sell it, and just move on. Or come to the realization, as you said, that this is now an investment property. It's not your primary home, and no one's gonna take care of it like you. And so I've had homeowners come to me and say, "Hey, Tim, I want to rent it, but also too, I want to go by and be able to check on the property. I don't want them smoking in the house." I'm like, listen, I don't think that's going to work, but if it can work, you may want to try to do this on your own, and you pick your own tenants and you work with them directly, because having a property management company involved, you put them in the mix of something they really have no control of or nothing to do with. Because once you turn it into an investment property, you have state laws that you have to adhere to as a home. You just can't pop up. You got to give adequate notice during normal business hours in order to be able to go visit the property. And this is just the law. And so you may feel a certain kind of way, but your feeling is not necessarily the law, and can get you in far more trouble than you anticipated on going down this particular road.
I have clients that constantly make mistakes based on emotions and not looking as a business procedure. You know, something where they saw a resident called in something that was just ridiculous, okay? And they'd rather the resident just move, right, than just take care of that. Because to them, it's just like, this person's so petty. And again, they're looking at it as like an emotional thing. Whereas to us, and that's why you hire a property management company, us it's just business. And we need to make what's the best decision for you to make the most money. And if that means fixing that one left light bulb on the right-hand side, because we know we're going to get $1,200 a month and we're going to keep getting it, if we do that, I'm going to tell you, go fix a stupid light bulb.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, especially better than trying to get the tenant evicted, having to sue or get sued by the tenant, and now you got tenant rights to deal with, which is really strong. And now you're in a position where you're paying out X sums of money to an attorney, and also now you got to compensate this tenant that you kicked out, basically. And of course, you also bring the property management into play and making them essentially liable of sorts in order to facilitate this, you know.
You know, it's just, you got to, like we said earlier, you got to look at it like it's your stock or another type of investment. It's got to be long term. You'll be happy with it.
Yeah, that's true. You know. So how much do you think should an investor put aside in terms of being able to deal with ongoing management, maintenance costs?
So my recommendation for every house you're going to buy, right, at least for the first one, start with $5,000 reserve, no matter what. And the reason I recommend that, and again, if you have maybe 100 houses, maybe you don't need as much, right? But if you start off your first 1 to 5, maybe even 1 to 10, right? Have $5,000 put away per property. Because I promise you, what's going to happen is everything will be going okay, right? But the same day that your kids getting braces, the same day your kids starting college, the same day you got to pay for daycare or school or whatever, I'm going to call you and tell you you need a new roof or sewer line. And it's going to happen. It always happens. I'm going to call you on the worst day. We're going to call you and tell you you got to do that. Nobody's fault. You know, the sewer line just broke, it's just part of it, or the roof we've tried to fix and it's no longer going to do. And if you have that $5,000 cushion, you always keep it, it'll be easier for you. It'll also be easier for you to make a good decision. And not say, well, hey, look, can we just patch that roof again? Because, you know, I don't have the money right now to do it, because the patch is probably a waste at this point.
Correct,
but you got to do something because your tenant's got water coming in on them, right? So if you have that reserve, it will allow you to save money really in the long run, because you'll be able to make the right decision and go ahead, in the case of the roof, just replace it versus patching it over and over again. And it won't be as much stress. Because when you get stressed, unfortunately, like anything, you make bad decisions.
That's true.
If you get nervous, you sell something for the wrong price. You know, you find that the people who are more successful, especially in real estate, is that they're able to hold on to it.
What they say, you know, don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait.
Right. And you'll find it's the right time.
On that note, you just highlighted something. I remember it was an investor that I was working with. He bought a property, kind of like a D- type property, and he was like, "Listen, dude, you know, this one, like, if you buying this type of property, you need at least 10 to 15 of them in order to be able to make this worthwhile. Buying one of these is not going to get you what you think is going to get you based on the spreadsheet." Can you kind of elaborate on that train of thought?
And we can even go back to the roof situation. Okay. If you don't have those reserves in place, right? Let's say you buy three houses, okay, and three maybe houses that are not in the best area of town, they're a little bit harder, and you buy those three houses. Let's just say each rent is $800 a month, right? And you got three houses, you're bringing in $2,400 a month, right? Well, if that sewer goes out, right, and it's going to cost you $5,000 to replace the sewer, right? It goes 2 months worth of your cash flow. So it's over. And then if you have mortgages on it, your mortgages are still due, right? You still got maintenance on the other houses, so it's not like the other houses stop. So most people aren't prepared for that. What you find though is when you get 15, 20 houses, right? You have so much more cash flow. When you have all that cash flow coming in, you're able to take those bumps. So you have that roof, okay, it's bad, you fix the roof, right? But you still got $15,000 a month coming in, so you'll be all right. You'll get through it to the next one. And that's why really when we're talking to people, and not everyone can start off with 15.
Yeah, I was just about to circle around to that.
So if you're not going to start off with 15 houses, I mean, just like buying stocks, right? If you go buy AT&T stock, right? You know your AT&T stock is probably going to be pretty solid, right? You're not going to get the best return, but it's going to be solid, right? You don't have to worry about too many dips. Whereas if you go and buy Bitcoin, which is big cryptocurrency right now,
the volatility
of it, it looks great on paper, you think it's going to go, but the volatility could go up and down. So what we recommend, again, and looking at, I know you work long on this, some people look at the big picture. Doesn't mean you should buy one or the other, it just means that you should buy the different assets and put them together.
That's true. Okay, true. So if a person, if an investor saying, listen, Terrence, I got, $200,000 to spend, I would prefer to buy 3 properties for the $200,000 versus one solid property for the $200,000. How would you, from a management perspective, how would you express the differentiation of those options to the investor?
Correct. So again, I would say, what's your long-term goal? They might say, look, I got $200,000 sitting around because I sold something else, I have nothing else to do with it, right? I need to invest this money for 10 years, right? I'd say, okay, that's what you're going to do, and you have your $15,000 in reserve, right? They say, yeah, I got $200,000, I got $15,000 in reserve. I go, okay, well, you can buy the less expensive properties, right? But they're going to go up and down, and some years you're going to lose money, you're going to be sending me money. Some years I'm going to be sending money. It's going to go all around, right? Or if look, I want to just test my feet, just see what it's like. I'd say, let's go to a little bit nicer property. And the advantage of a little bit of a nicer property, usually a nicer property, you're going to get a more qualified resident.
Mm-hmm. A different set of pool of tenants.
Different set of pools. So for every resident we take on, they have to make 3 times the rent, right? They have to have good rent history, okay? No evictions or bankruptcy. Okay? So those requirements we have to see also. They have to have good rental history. So we do that with everyone. It doesn't matter if you're renting a $500 place or a $10,000 a month place. All those things are required. But the person who's working at McDonald's, for example, right, who's maybe renting your $800 property, their job security isn't as much. You lose your, if you work at McDonald's, your job can come and go, right? If they're making $45,000 a year and their car breaks, right, or the kid gets sick, their likelihood they have less savings than they're going to be able to recover.
Less disposable income.
It's not that they don't want to. It's just life, right? So what's going to happen is the first thing they're not going to pay is going to be their rent, right? The person who's renting the $1,000 a month place, right, and now they're making, let's say, $60,000 a year, right? They're maybe working maybe they're a secretary somewhere, maybe they're in a little bit higher of a job, right? And in that job, they're not as likely to lose their property, right? And even if they do, they might have a little bit more space where they can do another job quickly. Maybe they have a little bit of disposable income. So in that property, you're going to find less problems with the collections. And the less problems with collections, where you're going to find less aggravation. The other thing it helps you with on the cash flow part, and I always tell people this, is that the toilet costs just as much in my $600 renter as it does in my $1,200 renter. They don't make toilets that are less expensive. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? The prices. So the price for the repairs are the same in the $1,200 one as it is in the $600 one. The paint's the same. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath that rents for $800 will cost just as much paint as that 3-bedroom, 2-bath that rents for $1,200, $1,300. So from that standpoint, you'll find that it'll just be smoother.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have a little bit more, if it's $1,200, you'll have a little bit more cash flow versus your $800 one.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. Because I tell investors all the time that, when you look at, especially for a new investor too, you want to make sure that you have as many safeguards in place, as many safety rails as possible.
Right.
And of course, neighborhood integrity matters. I mean, in being able to have the ideal neighborhood integrity typically is going to have to be associated with a higher price point in acquisition. I mean, it's just the way that it is.
I pulled up the house yesterday, right? I pulled up to this house and the person bought it, and it makes complete sense to me. I look at the house from the front, and I'm sure he bought it. Somebody took a picture from the front. It looks great. Had new windows, the landscaping looked nice, everything looked good. The area was a C+, B area, but again, everything looked good from the outside, right? Well, you look to the right, there's a vacant house. You look to the left, there's a vacant house, right? And you're right. So when you have those outside environmental things, it's hard to be sometimes successful with the properties. I mean, you can't be successful with them, but if you're in a nicer area, right, you're right, you don't have as much of those problems. And those outside environmental things do not come into play as much.
That's true. And on that same note too, is that it's one of those things where all things being equal, if I'm spending $1,200 a month in rent, I would prefer to be around houses that I know are occupied versus vacant houses, because I just don't know what's going on. Number one, if I'm moving in, most likely I don't already live in the area. I may live kind of close to the area, but not necessarily on the street.
Right.
So now I'm moving into a street, I don't know anybody, and then when I look out either window on each side of the house, both of those properties are vacant.
Right.
And I think from just an acquisition perspective, it's like, or even from a tenant perspective, because I've been a tenant before too, it's one of those situations where, if I'm spending $1,200, I'd rather have a neighborhood that's mostly occupied than unoccupied. But the problem that a lot of investors have, and this is one of the things that we talked about earlier too, is that, not having anybody that's independent on the ground, only contacting the management company after the acquisition.
Correct. So we beg everyone. We say, please call us before you buy it, right? Or we work with people like you or others in the process. And we take that team effort, right? And a lot of times people are doing what you're doing. They'll call us first and say, Ryan, I know this area. I know what's going on. I can look at the comps, but what do you know about it? Because we're all over the place.
That's true. Yeah.
And silly things like we know that 2 streets over, somebody was shot the other day. That sounds awful. Or there's a bunch of robberies or things are happening. We know that in advance. And when you say, man, but this street looks great. Well, I'm telling you, last week there was this problem. Maybe take a break from the street. Let's see. And that is really a hard concept. I do notice when people are coming from other places, it's so street by street here.
Yeah, that's true.
And you got to have somebody such as yourself, and using a management company also to be on the ground and tell you those things. Because you'll never know.
You don't know too. And I think the general public looks at, to greater evil or to a greater good, is that most people look at real estate agents as, basically, if I choose this one, all of them are equal, basically.
Right.
And the reality of it is no different than management companies, no different than the real issue is that everybody, just because they're maybe a licensed professional, doesn't necessarily have the nuanced knowledge that's going to really make a fundamental difference, a tangible difference in the investor's life.
Yeah.
And so a person is, well, you know what, I want to buy properties in this area over here, and what they don't know is that that street is squeezed in between 2 other streets that's extremely problematic.
Right.
And a person like me may say, you know what, I would love to help you buy this property, and I really, really appreciate the commission if you bought it. Yeah. But the reality of it is, let's just wait till we find something that's going to be more ideal, that's going to fit your overall strategy, right? It's going to fit your long-term strategy, because at the end of the day, we don't want to buy this today and have to sell it in 12 months at a loss. Because if we buy it today, you're going to sell it at a loss in 12 months. I mean, it's more often than not that you're going to take a loss on that, especially if you're buying something in a lower price point area or in a different asset class, a lower asset class. You just don't have those, you don't have as many options to get out of it.
Right.
Ideally, you want to have 3 options. You want to have an option to be able to sell it to another investor, keep it as a rental, or even retail it. Because that way you got all the options on the table. Yeah. And so if something comes up and a life event happens, and you're in a position where you need to make a decision in terms of selling one property over another one, that you got all your assets where you're able to say, you know what, I'm going to leverage multiple properties to give me some more cushion room, and it's less likely to take a loss. Of course, any risk, every investment involves risk.
Right.
And it's just a matter of how that investor goes about the due diligence process. Because what we're talking about now is really due diligence. Speaking to a real estate agent is going to give you some insight, on the ground insight other than just the comps, and speaking to a property management company is going to give you some insight from a management company perspective, because that's the management company is the key component other than acquisition that's going to make the property do what it needs to do.
And you bring up me and you're talking earlier too. You bring up an important thing, the relationship part, right? And the reason the relationship is important is that most real estate agents, right? And I'm a broker also, and it doesn't make them bad for us, but most of them it's about the transaction, right? And they want to get the transaction. Again, that's how they make a living. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
They want to get the transaction done. They bring them to you. They're presenting something to you, and that's okay. I don't know. There's not many people other than yourself. There's not many agents out there that really know the different areas, right? And there's not many agents that will pick up the phone and say, well, let me talk to a property management company first before I get involved in this,
correct,
right? They just think, okay, and look, there's plenty of property management companies you can call, and if you call them and say, I want to manage this, they're just going to say, okay. If somebody calls me and already owns something, I'm going to manage it, right? Why would I not do it? Now, if they called me beforehand and said, hey, what do you think about managing this? I might say, okay, we can manage this, but these are the headaches you need to be prepared for. And again, the reason I'm telling them that is, number one, I gotta deal with them forever. It's a long term. It's not
relationship based.
Relationship. I'm in with them for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, right? And when I have that situation, I want to make sure they know before they get into it, and I want to know what they're prepared for. And again, everybody has different risk levels. Some people are okay with that. Some people, they're not okay with it, and if they're going to buy a property in a certain area, they should be prepared for it.
They want to know about it too. Now you raise a really valid point too. Like, you can call, as an investor, you can call any property management company and ask them to manage your property. Most of them going to manage the property after the fact, but also too know that particular company is not on the hook for you buying the property.
It's always somebody else's fault. and I tell people that. I mean, I joke. I say, look, before you buy the property, they're like, well, you'll really tell me what you think about the property before I buy it. I said, absolutely. I said, I'm just CYAing. That's all I'm doing, because I just want to make sure that when this property, a great example I use, sometimes they'll buy properties already tenanted, right? I'll look at the property, I'll look at the inspection report, and I'll see that there's carpet in there, okay? Well, I know that day one, when that tenant moves out, right, and it's time to turn that property, I'm going to go back to that owner and I'm going to say, you know what, we don't need to use carpet anymore. We need to use plank flooring, right? And I know it's going to cost them $3,000 to $5,000 to do that, right? So I want to know before they buy that property, look, in 2 months or 2 years, when this property becomes available, are you prepared to spend $3,000 to $5,000 on flooring? Don't do it now, but are you prepared to do it? And if they're not, and again, just because I know when they get that job bid, they're going to look at me and think I'm crazy, I want you to already know that. Also, I want you to know when you're buying it to be prepared for it. So you have the correct amount of funds put away for it.
That's true.
And most people don't do that. And no real estate agent in town, or not no real estate, most real estate agents, right, aren't thinking about that. Home inspectors aren't looking at the carpet and telling you shouldn't have carpet because when a tenant moves out, you're going to have to replace it. So those are tools you want to know, and your due diligence that will make your life easier.
But I think that's extremely critical too. So we talked about how much a person should put down. We talked about what people should look for in terms of like the items, in terms of price point items, the biggest stuff that constantly keep coming up. And also we talked about the difference in terms of the quality of the type of property that an investor should buy. So for somebody that's new versus somebody that's been investing for a longer period of time, how do you help them kind of determine whether or not, if they bring you a property, you assess the property, and they're able to say, well, listen, Ryan, I want your insight in terms of, I've been doing this for 10 years, I've been doing it out of state, so I'm okay with taking a little bit more risk. So how much more do you share with that person versus the newbie?
Gotcha. So I think one thing, it depends on, why are you doing this? What's your reason for purchasing? If I'm talking to somebody who's 25 years old, right, and their goal is to, have money come in 15 years from now, right, that's a different conversation. If they're 60 years old and they're going to retire in 10 years, right, that's another conversation. If they're 70 years old and they're ready to retire, because then you can figure out their level of risk of how soon they do or don't need the money. Another example I use with people is that when they're financing, right? If I'm talking to someone who's 25 years old, right, that's about to finance a house, I might tell that 25-year-old, here's what I recommend. I think you should do a 10 or 15-year mortgage, right? And they might tell me, well, Ryan, if I do a 10 or 15 year mortgage, right, my $200 a month cash flow I get now is going to be almost zero, right? Well, what I tell them is, look, $200 a month, right, which is nice, right, to have that $200 a month, which very might, anything go wrong, $200 we all know can go away real quick, right? We also know $200 times 12 months can go away real quick, right? But if we can make it where you're cash flowing a little bit, right, in 15 years, that property, let's say you bought a $100,000 property, you put $20,000 down, right? But in 15 years, so when you turn 40, right, you own that asset, right? And someone else has paid it off for you. I mean, now you have options. You have options to pull the money out.
The leverage,
Leverage it. Send your kids to college. All the things you could possibly do that you'll have in that property. And that's it. I mean, that's where's your risk. If you're somebody who's got a $500,000 and you need to start seeing a return from it day one, right? Probably gonna say, let's go a little bit nicer of a property, or and again, we keep relating to a nicer property means a little bit more. It's not as risky, right? Returns less, but it's also more steady.
More consistency.
More consistency. And if you need consistency, that's where I would go. If you don't need the consistency right now, you might start at a different property.
You take a little bit more risk, and that makes sense too. So on this new arbitrage of what's going on, Airbnb, you got also too what's always been around is that people renting out rooms. So how do you view those avenues of management?
So the Airbnb, it has not become very successful in Memphis. One thing that I've found is that because our hotel rates are still pretty inexpensive, you don't find as many people doing the Airbnbs. Rooming houses, we're starting to kind of see that pick up a little bit. Uptick. It's really hard to do unless you're managing it yourself.
It is. I actually own one.
Oh, do you? Okay. And you manage it yourself, and you probably either have somebody who's knocking on the doors, or you're knocking on the door.
I got my guy.
Somebody's otherwise it's very, very challenging. It is extremely lucrative, and it can be. But if you can't go there and pull up yourself and do it, there are some larger management companies, like nationally, that I see are getting into the rooming house business. On the finding somebody local to do it for you would be very hard.
Yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging too. I got a business partner. He owns a lot of them. He, of course, does everything himself. And I've been kind of following him for the last year and a half, kind of see how can we take what he's doing and turn it into a model to be able to do it on a broader scale. And I just haven't been able to nail it down because it's because the turn is can be so frequent that a person can be in today and out by Friday, and now you got to go in and start all over again. And it's about can you gonna get some money from them? How can you pursue them? And and I also talked to one of my real estate attorneys and asked her because she contacted the free services for tenants, kind of like tenants downtown, and asking them like, how does this classify? Like what classification does this rooming house process fall under? And the person that's over the free legal service, free legal service, he was like, it's nothing in writing to determine how to go about doing evictions on these people. Depending on the area, and typically most of them in certain areas, they're not necessarily they are all over the place, but they're more highly saturated in certain areas of the city than other areas. But with that being said, you call the police out because people sometimes they say
it's a civil issue.
It's a civil issue. It's something like, okay, I understand. Like, listen, you got to go. Like, this y'all agreement. So it's just from that. So from the logistical aspect, it's challenging. On the other hand, from the legal aspect, it's a gray area.
Correct.
You really just don't know exactly how to operate. And so for me, being a licensed professional, I have to. My objective is always kind of run everything through my attorney because I just don't want to have my license. Correct. Question.
And that's one of the reasons we don't manage a lot of it because it's very gray and it's a problem. We've tried to partner up with people doing it and say, hey, look, you do it. We'll split something with you, that type of thing. Otherwise, it's very, very gray, and nobody wants to be the guy on the news throwing somebody out.
The news stay on top of it. The news stay on top of it. So listen, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk to me, Ryan. One final thing. So, of course, you all moved to Broad Avenue early on in my career. 2007, 2006?
About 12 years.
Yeah. So now the chickens come home to roost,
Yeah.
or the bankers come home
Yeah,
to roost.
yeah.
I mean, you all made a great investment on Broad Avenue at the time where, nobody thought anything remotely close was going to come over there now.
Including us.
So what led you all to make that acquisition?
So what we knew is, as a management company, right? Number one is, as a property management company, your location isn't really that important.
Yeah, that's true.
And we didn't even know how much less important it would become down the line. It used to be you had a place where people would come and pay, and that was important. And now, because we've moved almost everything online, it's even less important. But what took it was, we just liked the breakdown. We needed 3 buildings. It was 3 buildings. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but in this game, if you can hold on to it, you'll see it come and go. And when we bought this building over in this area, there was nothing. And no one was down here.
That's true.
Within 10 or 12 years, now you got a brand new 450 unit complex going across the street. We're able now. We were using all 3 of our buildings for the property management business. Now we're able to take one of those buildings and actually rent out to a commercial space. So now we're bringing even more income in just from our space. And again, because we've stayed there long enough, it's gave us a lot of options. And I'm seeing that just like in people's real estate they bought. People that started at $500 rents, now we're getting $900
Yeah, that's true.
So it's if you can hold on to it, and you have the risk tolerance, it can be.
So the takeaway ideal is that buy real estate, hold on to it, get you some good property management, and also make sure that you understand your risk tolerance. Listen, Ryan, thank you for taking the time. I know you got a busy schedule. I appreciate it.
Thank you.